Wow.
And it's a short book, it's a novella. This one I wrote about, it's also a novella. This series, from book 1 to book 7, I wrote in 6 months. And this one I did. So I have a process that allows me to write so fast. And I do it intuitively. I don't think about how I do it, but I try to kind of break it down in a way that helps me visually explain it, and hopefully it will make sense to you. I'm going to read the themes that I emailed so that you can have a reference of them. So this is book 3 of the Virgins and Battle series. This is not the first chapter. It's a theme within the first chapter. And this book I wrote, so it's London, England, 1940, World War II. Dorothy stood on the platform of the train station as close as she could to her husband, who looked like a recruiting poster in his RAF officer's uniform. He easily pulled her out of the station, with an unintended jostling by a group of soldiers running to hop aboard the party train. His touch, as always, felt confident for a man of his normal size and his Feet back on the train, something with her hand, she straightened from the following his eyes and very hard on his head. She was determined that his left would not be. There you go, Captain. She was the most handsome pilot in the office. Though I confess I counted it because that far enough to listen to her. She kept her feet, brushed a big thumb from her eye, Captain, and was pretending to fall down her cheek. Only in your eyes, love, I saw certain that I vow. I will every shred of courage in my heart and body to miss her. She kissed her so softly in the back of her throat. Their lips parted, echoed in her kiss her chest, and she said, "You mind after the thing, mind humming, and I'm help you with this sister. I think the lad understands with a smile, even at age, he passed the enormous purpose. He's brilliant, that lad. Tom's occasional Gaelic stroke never failed to turn to water, and stout and suffering like a cat should be fought to the Suddenly his arms went around her, strong and tight. You'll stay in my heart and in my prayers, and still pray for me, not only my Bonnie Donnie. I'll never stop. Their lips met as comfortably taking the next step when walking. They came together and kissed exactly as they had tens of thousands of times in the world. The course of their courtship. His hands rested on her. Fingers caressed his wax mustache back to her. She kissed him down, but the slight gal somehow felt bitter. Her heart went suddenly wanted to kiss him and kiss him and kiss him and never stopped. Desperately, it all stopped. When all the trains stopped moving. She urgently wanted this wretched very next kiss her husband and pour blood she kept in her heart and him. A shrieking train was startled at the moment in which clocks still rolled and soldiers still made places in the line. She opened her eyes, her lips equal to present reality. The reality lies suddenly behind minding children, keeping busy, staying useful, and fearing every moment that the last time that his husband's alive would be the very last time. After seconds that passed like that, her heartbeat faded, trembling in ears instead of beckoning a bite from the fire. Knowing one of them had to be the first to break away, she stepped back, slipped her back on, pushed it down from the throat. Go on then, don't miss your pain. I imagine you can come to the ground on partners as we told dallying with your wife on the platform. Well, the next have mine, had items. His eyes looked down at her, sparked passion. Realizing that him would be the last to be the one to carry with her mind's eye throughout and carry to sleep with her this time. Oh, Thomas, you are a private always have her. He hopped up on his step, surprisingly agile as always, and turned to blow her a kiss. I love you with all my heart. Value you. Hand slapped Thomas behind, almost knocking him off the step. Let's go, old boy, off his cell, whatnot. He glanced over Tom's shoulder. Send me some of those wonderful biscuits in the post, and little Tommy isn't looking, Dorothy. She laughed and waved as the train's whistle blew again. When she knew they could hear her again, she said, assuming I can get sugar rations, I'll send just as many cookies as they'll allow. But you must promise me to watch out for my husband, Sir Percy. Madam Captain, you need to shot to the tip-top of my priority list, he promised with me. Dorothy did not chase the train. The platform was far too crowded, and she chose not to make a spectacle of herself or her husband. Instead, she waited, and Tom waved back until she simply could not see him anymore. Her gloved fingers brushed her swollen lips where she still tasted him. Her lips tingled, still feeling his lingering kiss as if feeling that sensation of the amputated limb. Dejected, she turned and walked away slowly, completely alone, back down the platform, back to their old car, so that she could collect her children from her neighbor Beatrice in time to prepare dinner. She tried very, very hard not to burst into tears. So, that is the scene we're going to break down in this presentation. My husband does a lot better job of reading it for me than I do. He can throw in accents and he's less nervous when he's reading it. So, all right. So basically, the first thing I do is develop my character. And there are three spheres of characterization, I call them. There's the physical and the material, which is basically what do they look like, where are they presently, what is their current state of being, kind of. So it's basically just a physical aspect of the character. And then there's the intellectual side, which is their education, their career, their understanding, their worldview, their ability to critical think. All of these things develop the intellectual side of the character. And then there's the spiritual and the emotional realm, which is obviously spiritual. It doesn't have to be Christian, but it's spiritual and emotional. How do they react to things around them? How do they cope? How do they worship? How do they pray? Those things. And those three things combined create a balanced character. And as a Christian author, I always want the spiritual side to be the base of my character. It doesn't always begin that way, but every time I finish a book, my main characters have a strong spiritual base to their characterization. So a one-dimensional character obviously would just have one of these traits, which is fine if you're dealing with second or third character or secondary character in your book or story or whatever. You don't have to delve into every aspect of their personality. But when you're writing a main character, to have this physical attribute and not delve into anything emotional or spiritual or intellectual is going to create a very strong one-dimensional character. And then obviously you can have a two-dimensional character or a well-balanced three-dimensional character where everything kind of just goes together. I'll use one of the things I like to show is the Hunger Games metaphor. I have a 19-year-old daughter who is a voracious reader, and when the Hunger Games came out in the movie, she was reading all sorts of articles and fan-generated news about how excited everyone was about how perfect the movie represented the book. And since I am not a big reader, I haven't read the books, but we went to see the movie and I was fascinated with the visual images on the screen, and I wanted to read them to see what the author, Suzanne Collins, had written that would generate such an image on the screen that made her fans so very content and pleased with the way that their imagination had been projected. So I read the books. I got them off of my daughter's Kindle, and I read them in a weekend. And I finished the third book, and I was incredibly let down by the whole thing. And it took me about a week to really analyze why I felt so unsatisfied reading the books, and it occurred to me that there wasn't just no Christian spiritualness of the story, because obviously they weren't Christian stories, but there was an absolute complete lack of spiritualness of any of the characters at all. And because of that, it made them very two-dimensional to me, because even in a society where religion might have been stripped away, there would still be a spiritual side to the characters, and there wasn't even a long time ago, we might have prayed to some God kind of thing. It was nothing. And it made it very two-dimensional to me as I read it. In traditional Christian romance, I write a lot of Christian romance, what you'll find is that a lot of the physical is removed because certain gatekeepers have determined that it's wrong to display any kind of physical emotion or physical responses when dealing with romance, and it becomes a very two-dimensional character once you pull the physical out. And then, obviously with mainstream secular romance, you have it where a lot of the spiritual is gone and a lot of physical is pushed, and you get again two-dimensional characters. So obviously, what you're looking for when you're developing your characters is three dimensions. And you can do this on paper. There's all sorts of guides that you can pull where you sit down and you create your characters almost as if you were writing about a real person or interviewing a real person. What is their favorite color? What color is their hair? What is their favorite memory? And doing those kind of things helps you build the character on paper, which then you can then turn around and have all of your questions answered as you're writing. I have done it on paper, but it bores me to do it. I'll show you one way that I do it. I should have had this open. And I use Pinterest as a way to help me organize my thoughts about my characters without even realizing that I'm doing it.
Use Pinterest.
I'm finishing up a book right now, and I'll show you the board that I created for that book. Sorry. So I went to a talk given by Jude Deborah, who I think was Jude Deborah, and she had these notebooks that were super, super thick, and in them were house plans and pictures of characters and just everything you can imagine, lists of character names and all of the stuff. And she builds these books before she ever starts writing. And one time her publisher pushed her to not make a notebook. They needed the book a lot faster than what she could produce without a notebook. And she realized that when she started writing, she couldn't write. And I think listening to her talk about it, it made me wonder if she realized just how much of the book she writes as she's putting this notebook together, how much she organizes in her mind. So I go through and pin images, like this is my main character's home, this is another main character's home. I have a rock star who was not a Christian at the beginning of the book, and in the middle of the book, he became a Christian, so he has tattoos that are very strong imagery about kind of being satanic almost. He has band members. She is a Christian artist, and so they always wear the color purple because she's the daughter of the king, and purple is royalty. She has long blonde hair. So I use this when I'm developing my character. A lot of it is physical, and a lot of it is just as I'm creating their style and determining who they are physically, I start building in my mind the emotional and spiritual aspects of their character. So that's just my process. You can do it any way you want. You just need to get to know your character, whether it's a short story or a full-length novel. So ultimately, you're trying to achieve the big picture, which is a fully complete and story filled with three-dimensional characters and strong descriptions and full of emotion and depth. And you want every scene to be something that the reader wants to read the next scene. That's your whole goal. You don't want to end a scene and have the reader completely satisfied and they put the book down and just don't pick it back up again. So my process is a step-by-step process that is almost as if I were painting a picture. And it's not that I take my brush and run it over the screen and then suddenly I have all of this beautiful imagery and depth and texture and colors. This is stroke after stroke after stroke and all these different melding of colors until you get one beautiful big picture. And so the first thing is to lay the foundation, as if it were a sketch, as if I were drawing the black and white outline of this picture. I'm going to lay the foundation, which is basically who, what, when, where, and why. And the where and the why is kind of vague at this point. I don't spend a lot of time worrying about where and why, because those are things we kind of have to dig deeper to answer. So I'm just looking for very, very brief sketches. So in this scene, out of Charity's Code, the who is Dorothy Ewing, who is a housewife and the wife of Captain Thomas. What are they doing? They're parting ways, possibly forever, as Thomas leaves for war. When, 1940 London, where in a train station north of London, and why? To establish stories of emotional and spiritual state as her story begins. That's the purpose of that scene. That's the only reason that scene is in the book. Because the book isn't about Dorothy and her relationship with the husband. The scene is about Dorothy, who is a spy for Britain. But until we can get to her story, we have to establish her emotional and spiritual state about the war itself. So what I do is I use Scrivener. You can do this with note cards with a pen and a note card. You can do it with pen and notebook. You can do it using Word, where you just say in chapter 1, this happens. I like Scrivener. If you're looking for a good word book writing tool, Scrivener was programmed to be a tool for writers to use. So I love it. And one of the things that you can do is set up these note cards. These are not part of the story. If you open up the manuscript, you're not going to find these words anywhere. This is simply the visualization of each chapter. And it's very quick. Charles in the bonfire, Harmony in the hospital, Steve waking up Stone. Those are just me saying in this chapter, and then this chapter, and then this chapter. And I'll show you one that I have done that I haven't written anything on yet. This is just my agent wanted a 4-book proposal, and in less than 2 hours, I plotted out the first book from beginning to end by using Scrivener, they call it corkboard. So I can add another card here, and I can say, I can type what I want, and then I can move this around and I can drag it. And it allows me the ability to plot my books. I know where I'm going to begin. And I know at the end, they're married and happily ever after. And then sometime in the beginning, or in the middle, there has to be about 30 more chapters of stuff that happens. And so I can usually do 25 good cards, because as I start writing, the story will kind of take off, and there's going to be 5 or 6 more chapters that I add to this beyond this space. But the whole time I'm writing, even if I add 2 more cards in between here, I know that at some point I'm going to go from here to here. So Scrivener is not expensive. It's less than $100, and they usually run sales for it. I'm sorry, it's $45. So if you're looking for something, I recommend that. So, okay. So this is how I do the black and white sketch. And then I go in and add some color. I add dialogue. And so if you look at the scene with Charity, my mouse is stuck on the site. You can see with dialogue, what is she saying, what is he saying? It should always be natural, and it should never be contrived. And so the way you do that is to use dialect and jargon and add inflection. If your characters are Southern, they're going to say y'all, or wherever. I'm from the Army, so I'm pulling all I keep thinking of so many, I can't think of anything Southern suddenly. And inflection, and someone, an adult that might call another adult friendly, and that will be natural to your character. And the best way to discover if it's natural sounding is to read it out loud. If it doesn't read out loud well, then it's contrived, and your readers are going to not hear it correctly in their minds, which will kind of break that. So, using jargon and dialects, I use words like barons instead of children. Remind after the barons, remind Tommy he's the man of the house. He's brilliant, that laddie. That's something that a Scottish man in 1940 London is going to say. I cover it with Gaelic because he speaks Gaelic. So it's just basically, and I probably said when I was originally writing it, you mind after the children. I think the boy understands. Because I'm not in 1940 London at the time, I was just getting the dialogue out. And I'll show you again what I do. Here's the book I'm currently writing. This is the scene I was writing 10 minutes before the Skype call. And you can see that it's action, dialogue, action, dialogue, action, dialogue. There is no depth to these scenes. Action, dialogue, action, dialogue, action, dialogue. I don't have thoughts, I don't have feelings, I don't have motivations, I don't have prayers. I just have action, dialogue. Because that's the base of my story. So in a week or two, I can have 30 chapters with action dialogue written out, and what's left to do is now go back in and fill in all the color. So the first thing I do is do who, what, where, when, why, and then go in and add who and what, action dialogue, and then go back in and shape it. So in a matter of days, or sometimes in a matter of a day, if I suddenly decide I want to write a novella that I want to have published by a certain time in order to make it a Christmas gift for my readers, which is what happened with Christmas Diamond, I decided on a Wednesday I wanted to write it, and I had to have it published by Saturday to do what I wanted to do with it. And that was getting it back from my editor by Saturday. So I wrote it in a day, and then I went back in and filled in all of the gaps in a day, and then sent it to my editor, begging her and pleading her to give me a good edit in a day. So that's the first step, action dialogue, action dialogue. Don't worry about why is he thinking about that? Why is she thinking while he's saying it? What color are the pillows on the couch in the room that they're standing in? How does the platform of the train station smell? None of that is important at this point in time. That's all that you're doing is just getting out the action and the dialogue, which to me is the hardest part of writing the book. And if you can go quickly without being tripped up by the details, then you can have the sketch, the outline of the entire story done with less effort. It's all of the details that would slow you down. It would break my ability to truly see through putting out the story itself. So now we're going to add inflections or dialogue. So I don't just have a scene written at this point. At this point I have the whole scene written, and I'm going back into it now. So how does she say what she said? How does he say it? How does each voice heard? So his deep voice echoed in her chest as he said. That probably wasn't in the first go-around of writing. She said with a smile. His conversational Gaelic brogue never failed to turn me to water. That's how she's receiving what he's saying. So this is where you enhance the dialogue and the reception of the dialogue of the character. Now you add thoughts, which to me is the hardest part because I want to have my characters' actions relay what they're thinking. I have a hard time putting their thoughts into words. I want them to tap the counter with nervous fingers and have you know that they're nervous. But it really makes it better if you can add thoughts to the actions and make it one whole big giant picture. And this is where my editors, I have two good editors, and both of them come back to me with, what was she thinking? Why was she thinking it? What was she remembering? So here's the example enough imagery for you to be able to know what he looked like. I didn't need to go into the detail. She was determined that his last memory of her before he left would not be a woman in tears, which goes to that of the three-dimensional character of her spiritual and emotional state. And she's a strong woman. And I didn't have to say Dorothy Ewing was a strong woman. I am conveying it through her thoughts about her husband leaving. I'm giving you that impression without having to tell you that that's what I'm doing. So now we're going to have feelings. So if thoughts are hard for me to convey, feelings are even harder, which is stupid because I'm a romance writer, and romances are all about feelings. So how does the main character feel? What feelings are they hiding? What feelings are they expressing or repressing? So, look and see what feelings you're holding back on explaining that aren't being conveyed through words and action. So, despite the triviality of this beginning, this text felt somehow important. It felt bittersweet and frightening and final. And through this entire paragraph, what we get is her desperation of her husband. Because she doesn't want him to leave, and she's so upset that he's going, but her strength is keeping everything internal, and she's not going to do anything but just kiss him as hard as she can. And there's feelings all throughout the scene. If you wanted to go through and figure out where I put this feelings. So now we're going to set the scene. This is where you want your readers to be able to visualize where your characters are. Sometimes this is important, sometimes it's just extra work. It just depends on the scene. And in this specific scene, it was vital to know where they were and why they were there. So a shrieking train whistle startled her back to the present moment. So we know, and there's, you can imagine, she was, in the beginning of the scene, she was jostled by soldiers running to catch a train. We have shrieking train whistles. You can imagine that there's smoke, there's people, there's noise. So all of this creates the scene for you without saying they stood in a busy train station with lots of trains and smoke and noise. So you want to find a way to through her thoughts and feelings and her experiences, kind of set the scene without being so blatantly obvious about what you're doing. And now we're going to bring it all into focus. We're going to deliver the climax of the scene or the hook of the scene and make sure that there's an emotional and a spiritual point to be driven home. Because, like I said before, you don't want your scene to end and your reader to be completely satisfied and not need to pick the book up again. You want them to turn the page or set the book down and then go quickly make dinner and come back to it because they don't want to stop reading. So, at the end of it, how am I going to bring an emotional point home in this emotion-filled scene? So Dorothy did not chase the train. The platform was far too crowded and she chose not to make a spectacle of himself or her husband. Again, I'm driving home the point of her strength and her inner strength in this time of this horrible, horrible living. Instead, she waved and Tom waved back until she simply could not see him anymore. Her gloved fingers brushed her swollen lips where she still facing him. Her lips tingled. And so this whole time, when I was driving home in the emotional state, she walked back to her car and tried very, very hard not to burst into tears. Even when she's away from him, even when she's alone and private in her own car, she's still struggling to stay strong for her husband. And now her character is compelling the reader to know what else happens in the next 15 chapters in this book. And basically, by adding all of these elements in, get this big, beautiful picture that's full of depth and full of color and full of texture that was done by very, very, very quickly going through and throwing the plot out onto the screen and then going back in and filling in all the holes and making each scene perfect to give the reader an entire experience. That's probably the fastest I have ever given this presentation. I'm going to unplug my mic so I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you hear us?
Does anyone have any questions? I can hear you now. Yes.
Perfect. All right. So, any questions? Don't all jump at once.
I can't hear.
Scrivener, she's asking about what Scrivener is, how to spell it, or what it is.
Okay. Scrivener is, okay, let me put it back. Right, Scrivener is the program by literature. That's the name. So you search S-C-I-E-E-N-E-R. You only search it for literature. That's the only where else that's there. So just it's like 45 pages, and it's brilliant. It's math working, and I cannot. I usually do those words thorough. And the cool thing about Scrivener, the message. Can you see me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So Scrivener allows you to go through move through your book, chapter by chapter, and it just gives you so much flexibility as far as how you maneuver through it and then how you set it up. And you can convert it now. Once it's written, you can convert it into a Word document and a rich text file. The Mac version does whatever the Mac word processing program is.
Pages.
Or you can also, at this, from Scrivener, you can also create an ebook. You can do it yourself. Any other questions?
Anybody else?
Oh, I never started sharing.
Huh? Say again?
I said I had started to I said I could share the screen, but then I never confirmed, so y'all want me looking at my screen.
You said
Go ahead. I'll go ahead. I'll translate.
she always includes the Christian aspect in there. Do you have like an objective as far as Christian influence or whatever?
Since you always include a Christian worldview in your book, do you have a Christian objective or a certain objective that you're trying to communicate from a Christian point of view in the book, or is it just sort of determined by the? And I think I've got my end. I think the problem was on my end, so I don't think you need to use your microphone anymore.
Okay.
I think I have it fixed.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. I used to try to force my book to fit the message that I assumed the Holy Spirit decided I would convey. So in a book I wrote, I thought, before I even wrote it, I said, this is the verse of the book, because every book has a verse that fits it, and it was, I don't want to lose the whole, or gain the whole world and lose my soul. That was what I was like, that's my verse. And like 3 chapters into it, it occurred to me I was trying to force that into the story. And when I just let it go and quit trying to say this is what God would have me say, and let God then determine what I would say, it flowed so much natural. And now that verse for that specific book is God works together for all things for those who call it according to his purpose. So the answer is, my books are character-driven. My characters are inspired by the Holy Spirit. I almost have a whole story in my head before I even begin to write. And part of that is the characters. And if I just let the characters do their thing without trying to force the hand of God, then what God would have me convey just comes naturally out of my character. That makes sense. Occasionally I worry that my spiritual message isn't strong enough. But those are the books where I tend to get like the most feedback from readers saying, oh, you strengthened my faith, and God really using this. So I clearly shouldn't worry about it, and I should just let my characters do their thing.
Anybody else? Anything else? What's your next book?
I have the fourth book of a suspense series I'm just finishing. I was writing finance today. And I also have a standalone suspense that is about the Russian Mafia that is going to come out in August. So the Russian Mafia one is not part of the story yet. I wrote it to be part of the box set, and it's coming out of the box set and going on its own in August. And then this one will probably publish sometime in July, August, or September, depending on my editor is in the middle of moving from Pennsylvania to New Hampshire, so kind of bought me a little breathing room and finishing this book.
When you write stories that are so character-driven, Russian Mafia, for example, what kind of things do you do to research the Russian Mafia, for example, so that you're able to maintain some authenticity in a character that you may not have really any personal knowledge or background about? What's your sort of research methods to kind of get some really good information about this sort of backstories or these characters that you're writing?
Depending on the story, I usually will go to where I'm writing and interview the person who does the job that my character does. So, for instance, I have a book that has the prosecutor for violent crimes for the city of Richmond, Virginia. And that was my main character, so I went to Richmond, Virginia, and I interviewed the prosecutor for violent crimes, and I spent the day with her, and came out of there, ready to finish the book. With the Russian Mafia one, I did a lot of online research, a lot of research into sex trafficking, and I didn't actually go to New York. I didn't interview any federal marshals about witness protection or anything. I pulled a lot from Hollywood and from online research because these books were so character-driven that the little details were really minor. In fact, this is a book about the Russian Mafia that engages in sex trade, and one of my beta readers told me that it was really tame compared to my other books. How is that tame?
So do you find that, like, when you go and you interview someone as sort of background research, do you find that they actually integrate and actually become part of the character that you write, or are you able to separate sort of the person that you're interviewing from the character that you're developing?
My characters are there. A lot of times they affirm my character. This, for instance, the prosecutor in Richmond, she was even physically similar to my character. I couldn't believe how many traits they shared. It was as if I had interviewed her, then wrote the book. When I'd written a book, and then I was getting conflicting information about how they would handle the crime scene. And so I went to speak to her specifically to make sure that what I understood to be true was true. And it was like one thing after another, her desk, her setup. I mean, I had to change just a few things about the place where the courthouse was and stuff to make it right. But I tend to make a lot of stuff up on the fly and then make notes for myself to research it. So like writing World War II, World War II is a passion of mine. I knew my whole life I was going to write a series set in World War II about World War II spies. I have been reading and watching and embracing every World War II research possibility I can get. I've been on USS Alabama, the Laffey, the USS North Carolina. I've gone to the World War II Museum. I've gone to the Spy Museum. I've interviewed soldiers and everything I can do. And then I sit down and start writing, and I'm like, well, what kind of shoes would she be wearing? I have no idea. I should know this. I can see it in my head, but I don't know what she would actually be wearing. So what I do, instead of letting it slow me down when I don't know the answer to the research, I just use a bracket, and I'll say, figure out what kind of gun she was firing. What would he be driving? What kind of gift would he get from his parents in 1940? Those kind of things, because I don't want to be slowed down by the details. The whole point of what what I do is quickly putting out the books. And so I do a lot of it intuitively, and a lot of my characters are just able to take it and go. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Anyone else?
This is not a question, this is just a statement. I really appreciate the Pinterest idea. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's
That is fantastic.
Yeah, that is.
I'll show you let me see. Let me share my screen properly this time. I'll show you the picture that inspired Charity's entire book. Can you see my screen?
It's coming.
I closed it. Oh, no, I didn't. There. Okay. All right, so this is Charity.
I've lost you. Don't see you.
That was the scene. That was the picture that I pinned.
I've lost you. We don't see your screen.
Can you see me now?
No.
Says your screen. Anyway. Sorry.
We've lost your video too.
Okay, I don't know why. Oh, please button. Okay.
There you are. Okay. Gotcha. Yep.
Start. There's Charity.
There we go.
There we go.
Oh, okay.
So I saw that picture and I wrote Charity.
Huh.
So
Very good.
that's how my thing works. And so using the Pinterest board just really, and it helps me to go to describe something. I've learned to look for houses for sale from the area where I want my characters to live and find the house that they live in. And then, what's really cool with the internet is you can go look at all of the rooms and you can see the layout of the house. And you have it. You don't have to make it up and then be wrong.
Yeah.
It gives you some firm consistency as you're setting up descriptions.
That's very cool. I love this. I love seeing how people are using Pinterest in non Pinteresty ways.
Yeah.
I don't know if that, but yeah, so it's interesting.
Well,
Not the way it's intended to be used.
Of marketing too, because a lot of fans on my Pinterest board, and when I set a new one up and start, I get so many emails. Oh, you're going to put this one in.
Yeah, that would be helpful too.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Any other questions for Halley?
That was fantastic.
Well,
It was
Very helpful.
yeah. Thank you so much, Halley. That was insightful, and the fact that you can crank out a book in 2 days and have it to the publisher Wednesday to Saturday is pretty impressive. We appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. Again, I appreciate you being willing to kind of share your thoughts and wisdom to us especially on such short notice. But I appreciate it. Thank you again, and we appreciate it.